Hey everybody, this is Nemo, and once again it's Monday night and I've got a game. This one's a little bit unusual because I'm not with Hoko, he wasn't around tonight, and moreover I'm showing you kind of in the middle of a game. I'm actually watching this in real time, live casting and all that jazz. Um, and it's a huge game, it's a 5v5, so I'm not actually going to try to pick apart every single thing that's happening because there's just too much going on. But I figured it might be a good opportunity to kind of show some mechanics and context, talk about how the game works, what teams are doing well, what they're doing poorly, so on and so forth. So I'll jump into it. Um, this map is Kiev, which the prominent feature is this hill in the middle here, and it's an extremely resource-heavy map. I was just showing you the resource map right there. You can do that by pressing F4. This map has a huge amount of resources, a huge amount of command on it. So generally, when you're playing this in like a 2v2, and especially a 1v1, even a 3v3, you need to expect tanks really early in the game because they show up super early. It's a map where you can tech up aggressively without necessarily being punished for it. So in terms of teams in the north, we have Boomy playing GBR, we have Codeman playing US, Galileo playing Soviets, who is a new player, so he's asking him some questions here and there. Kamar playing Soviets as usual, and Thinksum playing Germany. In the south, we have Zhao playing Italy. Let's see. Ford42, another new player, playing GBR. Ars de Caverns, also playing GBR. Player 01 playing Germany, and Shibumi playing US. That's a mouthful, lots of players. So, this situation in brief. Coming into this game, looking at the teams, I basically expect the North to win. Like, it just total, like, straight judgment in terms of the players there. Boomy and Kamad are both really good players. Thinksum is an exceptional team player. I don't think he ever plays 1v1, but when every time he's on a team, he makes that team way stronger because he's just a really good kind of group organizing player. And so I'm basically expecting North to be crushing it. And what's interesting is that maybe as a result of the build that Boomy went for, that it isn't necessarily happening. Boomy went for a really artillery heavy, or kind of artillery and infantry oriented build. This can be really powerful because the way artillery works is that when you have line of sight, your guns can zoom in, if you're targeting something that's in your vision area, and so for Boomy it's this area right here, as long as he still has infantry there, of course. If you're targeting something in that range, the howitzers become way more accurate, so they can be used sort of for tactical support. Whereas normally they're really inaccurate, you just have to kind of fire them and hope that something lands in the vicinity that you want it to land in. So, okay, what's Galileo doing here? Some Su-76s. So Galileo right now, pause. And well, that's okay, I'll keep talking. So, Galileo right now is making a couple of mistakes that are pretty typical of new players, and we don't do a great job of describing this to people who are new to the game. But basically, when you have vehicles like this, they have very little line of sight. So when they run off by themselves, you can see these vehicles can only see in this little tiny circle right around them. So it's really easy for anti-tank guns to kill them, for anti-tank infantry to kill them, as we just saw. The other thing is that he's using a move command. So as most units in the game, when they're moving, they're very inaccurate. We kind of make that distinction because sometimes you want your units to move really quickly and you're not so fussed about their offensive capability, and sometimes you really want them to be kind of making the most of their attack power. So if you want them to attack effectively, you need them to stop when they're firing, and the way you do that is by issuing fight commands, which look like, you can see Jal's using them right here. So let's see, what's Jal doing? He's got a couple of gun trucks from Italy, and he's got some howitzers. Several howitzers, actually. Let's see, what are those? I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Oh. And I guess this is a little too much for Shibumi's computer. I think he's going to duck out and give his stuff to someone else. Um, but uh, but yeah. So what's interesting to me about this game right now is maybe because there are so many people on the map, it's remaining a really infantry vehicle artillery oriented game. Whereas normally Kiev is it's like there's tanks immediately, really fast early in the game. Um, and the whole game revolves around like, okay, you know someone's going to show up with tanks really soon, therefore you need to have counters prepared for that when it happens, so on and so forth. I guess right now it's a mix of there are a couple new players on the map, so they're not necessarily as familiar with the dominant strategy for this map, um, and also there's so many people on the map that the resources are being shared among lots of folks, and as a result, no individual one has a ton of resources to devote to upgrading to tanks. So let's see what Jal does with this attack here. You can see he's using his artillery to directly support his infantry as they advance, which is really cool. The tricky part is that he's kind of walking them into these light machine guns, these Brens, um, which are really effective at suppressing infantry. So you can see most of these infantry are pinned or suppressed. Although, oh, and so you can see Ford 42 there was, maybe he wasn't aware about the AT guns, but so normally that kind of move is really effective when you bring some vehicles in kind of behind machine guns that are defending and then mix them all up. Unfortunately, in this case, Boomy had anticipated that, and he had a bunch of anti-tank guns here ready to deal with any flanking vehicles. And so now, what happened just now was Zhao was attacking, and Boomy didn't have very much ammo. You can see up here his ammo command is basically his logistics is empty. The reason it's empty is that he's got a ton of howitzers, and howitzers are really expensive. You can see they use 18 logistics every time they fire, and so that's out of, he's got 5,000 right now. And so when you have as many of them as he does, 7, firing constantly, it burns through that amount of command very quickly. But Thinksum, in his typical team player way, has been stockpiling these logistics storages so that on the refill he had 8,000, like a huge amount. And so he was able to lend some to Boomy, and then Boomy's guns had enough ammo to fire, and you can see what happened as a result. Basically, everything got wiped out very quickly. Howitzers are really inaccurate, so using them for kind of close defense like that is sort of a measure of last resort, but it's still pretty darn effective. If you have as many of them as Boomy does, and he has 7, like I said. So, the other kind of notable thing about the British artillery is that it's a 25-pounder, which means it's on a turntable mount. And so the way we reflect that in the game is you can see this angle of attack for the 25-pounder is kind of substantially more than what you have on the, say, the Italian gun, which most of the other factions have guns that with a fixed side, a fixed mount, so they can't rotate and fire to other parts of the map as easily. So, okay, up here, I think Ejal just doesn't quite have enough micro to keep up with what's going on. So he's kind of walking guys right into a defensive hardpoint here. And you can see Boomy Kamad is teching up to tanks very heavily. So that's gonna, I think, so this used to be Shibumi when they were playing 5 to a side, but I think, so Shibumi's computer couldn't quite keep up and he ducked out. Zhao ended up taking over the team, and I think it's just a little bit too much micro to keep up with not Zhao, excuse me, Ford 42. Oh, okay, yeah. But yeah, so Ford 42, I think he's mostly focused on what's happening over here. You can see his cursor right there. And he's doing a great job taking out this hard point by Boomy, actually, with support from Zhao's howitzers. Let's see, there it is. But on the other side, there's a lot of money in resources that's being basically just wasted right now, sending it directly into a defensive hardpoint by Kamad. So I kind of expect that once Kamad pulls his things together and gets his tanks ready, this game will kind of fold up very quickly. But we'll see. Anything can happen. I'm a little curious what Ours to Convergence is doing. He's building sextons, so self-propelled howitzers, but he's bringing them awfully close to the front line, which is really strange. Like that's like you can see the range on these units is enormous. They cover most of the map because they're literally howitzers on wheels. He's using them in kind of a more directed usage, which is, you can see, not very accurate. Like they were aiming here and they ended up hitting here. But, you know, if you have enough of them, they fire enough. Like, it won't be the most efficient use of your logistics, but it'll be effective enough. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Fort 42 is putting together a really great offensive here. He's pushing Boomy back. He might even make it up if Zhao can support him enough with these guys who are under constant artillery fire, so they're suppressed. They can't move too quickly. He might even be able to wipe out this whole little hard point, which would be probably not enough to win in the game, but it would be a big improvement. I see Kamar opted for a Katyusha, which is, in fairness, a pretty good option when things are stalemated. I think if he had scouted a little more, he would have realized that the defensive measures here were pretty limited, and he'd probably be able to push through them without investing in as much as a Katyusha costs, which is a lot. But yeah, this is a game of howitzers. Holy cow! So Codeman, this is something that Codeman does very typically, and it's interesting because I always have assumed it's like, oh, it's not very effective when you just deploy a bunch of howitzers that cover kind of the whole map, the way they're stretched out like that, and just let them fire as much as they want. So the downside of this approach is that you burn through a lot of logistics, and it's not directly apparent how much benefit you're getting for using up all that ammo. And granted, in this case, Codeman has an enormous amount of storage. You can see he's got 16K in the bank because he's taking advantage of the US upgraded storages. This is kind of the special upgrade for the US. They get to upgrade to a double storage, which stores a lot, has a huge capacity. But with one of the interesting impacts of having howitzers that just free fire like this is that your enemy infantry are frequently pinned or suppressed. And so you can see Zhao, he's trying to move infantry around the map, but the constant howitzering here is keeping them from moving very quickly. And it's really limiting the amount that he can do to move his force around the map to take advantage of situations. Which is, I think, it ends up being a fairly substantial impact in a larger game like this, because these team games kind of, they usually turn on multiple teammates being able to push through the same location at the same time. And so if a lot of your force is tied up and can't move around too quickly, it makes it hard for you to exploit an opportunity that might have turned up. And there goes the Katyusha, and really kind of a mixed usage there. I mean, okay, he saw the sexton, which was surely annoying, and got it, but the Katyusha, the cost of doing that is, you can see 940 logistics per shot, and so in firing that artillery barrage, Kamar just used up a fourth of his current available logistics. Granted, his teammates are storing a lot, so this artillery heavy focus is working out okay. Ah, tanks. Okay, I was wondering when someone was going to go tanks. In this case, it looks like it was Zhao, whose base is under heavy artillery fire. You can see all of his own guns are actually pinned right now, so he can't fire back. Something I often like to do in this situation is when your guns are getting hammered, but you know where they're getting hammered from. In this case, I'm sure that Zhao is aware of Boomy's guns here. You can build a single howitzer somewhere that isn't being fired at and fire smoke rounds into a general area, and so a smoke round would cover a huge amount of this, like maybe even that much. And within that area, the howitzer's firing would be basically completely ineffective. And so the cool part about that is that one gun firing smoke can prevent a lot of impact from other guns firing damaging shells. Okay, let's see how the light tanks are doing here. So Zhao brought up a whole ton of light tanks right up into the middle. Um, it's kind of mixed, honestly. Yeah, there's so much artillery going on here that, and these things have such thin skin that they're not holding up too well. There's also enough of these Su-76s that, which have a gun that's more than sufficient to deal with these units, as you just saw. So yeah, it was kind of a the tricky thing with big team games like this is that usually in like a 1v1, a light tank is really effective as long as the enemy is still mostly in vehicles, which is generally the case here. Or if you just need a lot of tank-like things. However, in this case, there is so much anti-tank stuff on the field. I mean, you can just see like this area in terms of anti-tank static guns is covered. There's all these Su-76s. And then Kamar is going for maximum overkill with 4 IS-2s. So these are probably the second heaviest tanks in the game after the Tiger IIs. And yeah, they are, I would say, maximum overkill for this situation, but will surely be effective. Like in conjunction with this infantry push, you know, as any time Kamar wants to drive down the bottom of the map, he'll be able to. Pretty much. You can see, think some man here saying, mentioning how much ammo consumption his allies are using, and it's a huge amount. So like Kamar has at this point a couple of howitzers, 5 to be exact. So each of those uses up 32 logistics per shot. Boomy has how many? 11 howitzers. Codeman has 5 howitzers. You know, basically this whole team has invested a huge amount into artillery. And it's proving effective. You can see Zhao's base is kind of getting hollowed out here, and his own guns are totally ineffective. You can see what I was mentioning earlier here about infantry being pinned, even in their base. And so this really prevents a lot of movement around the field. It really slows down your deployment. So Zhao once again with the light tanks, but you know, he hardly got out of his base before he saw that Boomy already has units there. And in this situation, you can see, well, why isn't this tank shooting at this infantry guy? Well, you can see the tank doesn't see it. So infantry are only visible in this light-colored area. You can see it kind of in here. And this is the range at which vehicles are visible, vehicles and buildings. So these tanks are actually really blind. Like, they can see some of these, the other vehicles here, but they really can't see the infantry around them, which is the kind of major drawback to vehicle units. Okay, here comes Kamar driving with the swarm of IS-2s once again. So the reason I said these are maximum overkill and kind of chuckled is that usually you go for heavy tanks because your opponent has a lot of armor and you're in a standoff situation. And so basically you need a bigger gun with more range and the ability to take some hits from enemy guns before your own armor will die. And so the major benefit of most of the heavy tanks is that they have a really powerful gun and a lot of armor, so they can get into range of the enemy armor, fire, usually kill it in a couple of hits, take some hits in the process, and everything's still okay. But there's really... I take that back. I said there was not much enemy armor. I was totally wrong. So yeah, Ars de Commerce has been building Churchills. So Churchills are funny in terms of their setup, because they have a huge amount of armor on the front, but their gun is actually really pretty measly. So they're most effective as infantry support tanks, whereas the IS-2s here have both a huge amount of armor and a really effective gun. You can see it's lots of range and lots of penetration, even at high range. Nice. Using a Wasp by Forward 42, cool. So you might have just seen the conversation between Thinksome there saying, I'm going to have 30k storage next to refill. And you can see this is an enormous amount of storage, just like ungodly amount of storage. But because his allies are, you can see he's empty, his allies are actually using all of it because it's all being poured into artillery. What he said to Codeman was that you don't have any anti-air there, that's living dangerously. And so what he's talking about is the risk of someone in the south going air, which, let's see, I don't think anyone did, or if they did, it died. Yeah, someone going air, buying fighter bombers or attack planes or something, and then swooping in here to blow these up. And so you can see Codeman, you know, he's got some anti-air around his base, but probably that's sufficient. But Codeman Thinkson was saying this is a risky setup because a single, you know, like a couple of medium tanks or something, if they snuck into here, could eliminate a massive investment. I mean, we're talking about, if I just select the ones that are right here, how much money are we talking about? 72,000 command, which, you know, that's just massive, massive, massive. He's probably pretty safe because his team is winning, so this isn't too big a deal. But yeah, generally speaking, that's the sort of investment you want to spend a lot of money to protect as well. So here we can see the IS-2, two heavy tanks facing off, and so, you know, the Churchill has a huge amount of armor. If I'm the IS-2 attacking the Churchill, I can't do very much damage to the front. But enough of those, the shells are so powerful that they're still effective in numbers. And also, Kamad has kind of a flanking angle here, so he might be able to hit the Churchill from the side, where he'll do much more of the shell damage, much more of the damage to the unit. But you can see Kamad is using up so much ammo that a lot of his units are empty. Actually, it's not big. I take that back. This is actually an ammo distribution problem. So what you usually want to do with, or rather, there are two aspects to ammo. One of them is having enough of it in the bank. The other part of it is getting it out to units that need to use it. Oh, I'm going to be so happy if this succeeds. He's bringing up... So he used the Churchill here to distract it, and then brought up anti-tank units, and he might even be able to get it. Oh, but Kamad noticed in time, and he's running away. Ah, good move, though. Good move. I don't know if it was strictly intentional. I think this is just a fight command all the way up, but the timing was nice in any case. Alright, so let's see what's going on over on this side. Oh man, so much artillery. This is crazy. One interesting thing here is with the team dynamic, kind of, you can notice that Thinkson basically doesn't have army units on the field. Almost none. He's spending all of his income, basically, building these storages to hand off to his teammates. Okay, Ford 42 dropped out. Yeah, I mean, I understand why. It's looking a little grim for the South right now. And frankly, I expect this game to be over fairly soon. There's just so much artillery that there's only so much you can do before important things start to get blown up. I mean, you can see in this case, you know, this storage is getting directly targeted by all of those howitzers, and like, because they don't have line of sight, it's really inaccurate, so it'll take a long time to actually kill it, but there's the volume kind of makes up for the lack of accuracy, and there goes that storage. And so, you know, you can kind of compare and contrast, like, how much storage does Jal have? He's got 6,000. How much storage does Ars de Camarnes has? He has about 9,000. And so let's compare that to North. How much does Thinkson have? He has 26,000. And Codeman is 30,000. It's just that's where the resource advantage really makes itself felt in the late game. It's either huge numbers of tanks or a massive storage advantage, which is then turned into a firepower advantage via artillery. Yeah. Another thing worth noting in terms of ammo distribution, you can see these units here that I'm highlighting are the ammo distribution centers. Actually have a huge radius of effect. They're really expensive. You can only buy them from you can only use advanced constructors to make them advanced engineers. But when you build them, they supply a huge part of the map. And the benefit of that is that now you don't need to have a half track, like a vulnerable half track or truck storage, like uh, right in this area, right next to the units you want to support. Instead, you can support them from far away, which is a huge deal because you end up accidentally running out of ammo and leaving your armored units kind of much less defended. That happens much less often when you have a large supplied area. The downside of this is that obviously you're always supplying all the units that are in that supply area. So if you start running out of logistics and you don't want to supply some units, then it's a little harder to control which ones get it and which ones don't. So at this point, we're kind of watching the slow end of the game. Games like this usually end slowly because people don't want to give up after it's been a long game, but also because on a map with this much resources, you can invest pretty successfully in a really heavy defense. So even now, if it's harder with artillery to make a sudden comeback, but if Kamar, for example, happened to, attack move all of his tanks into the enemy base and didn't really take care of them, they would probably die pretty quickly to anti-tank guys. And as a result, he would lose like 80k or so of investment, which might be enough to kind of give the South a chance to turn things around. With artillery, it's a little trickier because it's much harder for you to accidentally squander the units that are producing that firepower. The bigger risk with artillery is that you will overspend your current logistics capacity and leave yourself without enough ammo. The other aspect of running out of ammo, which let's see if I can find a team that's out of ammo right now. Everybody's pretty well supplied, so good for them. Oh, we'll also resupply. No, everyone's just well supplied. This is cool. Okay. Well, so when you run out of ammo, your infantry fire about 30% more slowly. So that's a huge minus to their firepower later. When you have a lot of infantry. So running out entirely is a major disadvantage. But yeah, like really, this game was decided by. So let me talk a little bit about what could have gone differently for the South team. So what we're kind of watching here is massive buildup of artillery, massive investment in logistics, and as a result, just kind of the South team's getting totally hollowed out. You can see this area here is just kind of burned from all the artillery. I mean, at this point, Boomy's actually probably wasting ammo, even firing there. But so what could they have done a little differently? So the tricky thing, so basically, because there's so much investment in artillery, and the main drawback of artillery is the huge logistics consumption. The trick would be to do something that can move quickly around the field so they don't get nailed by the shells, still has enough power to wipe out the storages when they get to them if they're going to raid them. And so the solution to that is basically somewhere along the axis of light vehicles like armored cars to light tanks to medium tanks. Probably, what was that? That was loud. Probably the most successful thing that could have happened from the South would be an attack with a whole bunch of medium tanks. And if you were able to send them kind of up the map and back into these storages, and you were able to take out some of Codeman's storages, for example, that would be a massive hit. I mean, probably, we're talking 15 minutes ago at this point. That would be a massive hit, and as a result, most of the guns would probably run out. In which case, they are not that useful. So someone's having connection issues. Kamar looks like. But so what that didn't really happen. The main investment from the south was kind of spread out. Some of it went into heavy tanks, um, like the Churchills here. And really, Churchills are probably the wrong answer to most of the situation here. They're really great for providing infantry support, but they're not very great for dealing with enemy heavy tanks. And so right now we're going to watch these attack aircraft take out the Churchill, indeed. But yeah, so Churchills represent a really substantial investment, but not necessarily with a massive benefit in this situation because there are so many enemy heavy tanks. That's something Churchills are not very good at. Great Britain has a couple of really great tools for dealing with enemy heavy tanks, namely the Achilles Tank Destroyer or Sherman Fireflies. Because they're quick, they've got a good turret, and they can move around enough, and they have a powerful enough gun that they don't have to be right next to the tank in order to deal substantial damage. Of course, another option for dealing with kind of being massively overwhelmed by artillery like this is to get a few guns of your own and, like I said earlier, try to fire smoke at where the guns are attacking from. That won't necessarily totally shut them down, but it is kind of a disproportionate effect. Like a single gun firing smoke at a battery of guns can make that battery totally ineffective in exchange for only one gun being occupied of yours. Looks like Codeman started to build up tanks. Stewards, interestingly, light tanks, but honestly that's probably enough. It looks like he just kind of attack moves them into the enemy base. Those Stewards are a really effective infantry support tank, and they're wonderful if your enemy mostly has vehicles. But as soon as there's enemy armor, unless you have a great number of them, they're not terribly effective. But yeah, you can see, wow, Galileo having a pretty solid game for a new player, so nice work. But you can see the game is very much over as soon as the enemy reaches your bank of storages. This is something that it's kind of like the headshot mechanic. Like as soon as a team loses the bank of storages, it's such a substantial investment and has such an impact on their the ability to keep playing, because as soon as you run out of storage, you run out of ammo for your howitzers and your tanks and your vehicles, and your infantry start firing more slowly. So basically, if you can get to the storage, you can deal a severe blow very quickly. So most games end when the enemy makes it to the storages and blows them up. But Galileo going to discover right now why having infantry with your vehicles is important. He made it. I guess there's so much artillery happening here that the anti-tank guy was actually suppressed. But here comes the end of the game. You can see a bunch of tanks coming in. Kamad still hasn't... Oh, is he now bringing his things in? Yeah, he just put them on fight. And yeah, this is the end. So like I said, there were a couple things the South team could have done a little bit differently to avoid being kind of wiped out by artillery so heavily. The most effective counter to artillery is basically medium tanks because they're healthy enough to not get severely damaged. Excuse me, gotten severely damaged by an artillery hit, and they've got a strong enough gun to blow up a storage in basically one hit. So they're an extremely effective raiding unit. But it's hard, especially in a case like this, when you don't have map superiority. And so if your enemy controls the map, you are going to have an extremely, throwing out a bunch of medium tanks is basically a really risky move, because you don't know if they're going to suddenly run into a bunch of anti-tank mines or a bunch of anti-tank infantry or whatever. There are all kinds of things that can kind of suddenly collapse that strategy very quickly, as you've seen a couple of times. Is like when Galileo moved his units through the middle there and ran into a bunch of anti-tank infantry, they kind of evaporated. So that's the risk you take when you blindly raid with medium tanks. On the flip side, the potential advantage is huge. Um, so it's a calculated risk, which is what RTS is all about. And with this, so you might have seen the message that team so and so has an overwhelming numerical advantage. We display that message when the game is basically over, and we make all of the units on the team that is losing visible to the enemy, so that there can't be any like I'm gonna go run around and hide my units or whatever on the map. Just the game's over. So. And it will be over. And oh, but Zhao he wanted to get those planes out there. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to do very much for him at this point, especially because of the U.S. armor, which has these anti-air machine guns on the top. Something you kind of get for free as an air player, as a U.S. player. So the very last unit is. And that's it. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope that was at least interesting or educational. It was kind of a crazy game because it's a 5 on 5 and there's a ton happening all the time. Um, but yeah, leave a note if this is the sort of thing you want to see more of, see less of. Thanks a lot.